I am Ariana Miller, born and raised in a wealthy family in the upscale Buckhead neighborhood of Atlanta. In that world, value wasn't measured by kindness or passion, but by job titles on business cards, brand names on handbags, and how often your name appeared under gold donors in charity magazine columns. My father, Thomas Miller, was a renowned real estate investor, the kind of man who could call the mayor at 2 a.m. and still get through like an old friend. My mother, Evelyn, didn't work, but was never idle. She managed the family image, as she proudly claimed, scheduling donor dinners, silent auctions, and me. To her, I was an unfinished blueprint, a project that needed refining to fit the polished portrait of the Miller legacy. I was the middle child. My older brother Brandon was the living embodiment of family pride, a Georgetown political science graduate now serving as a senior advisor to a senator. My younger sister Madison had just turned 22, studying law at Harvard, and had once appeared on television as Miss Southern Scholar of the Year. And me? I knew how to cook since I was 8, not just cracking eggs or pouring milk. I mean, diving into the aroma of cinnamon, the bite of dried chili, and the crisp crackle of perfectly seared duck skin. While others dreamed of becoming CEOs, I just wanted to stand beside a stove, wooden spoon in hand, heart racing with the rhythm of simmering stock. But in our household, cooking meant one thing: failure. What are you thinking? Go to college just to spend your life covered in grease and knives? My mother once screamed in the middle of the living room when I let slip that I wanted to attend culinary school in New Orleans. My father was colder, more surgical. He lifted his whiskey glass, leaned back, and said, "You can cook when you're someone's wife, but if you plan to make a living off a kitchen, forget about calling yourself a Miller." I didn't cry. I had gotten used to that contemptuous stare ever since I was 13, when my mother forced me to quit baking club in favor of more SAT prep. I never beat Madison in debate competitions, nor could I get my father to mention me during dinner parties like he did with Brandon. But I had something they didn't: a wild belief that food could make people go silent and then cry. I learned to cook in the kitchen of our housekeeper, Rosa, a woman from Mexico, the only person in our home who ever told me, "You have the soul of someone who nourishes." I didn't fully understand it at the time. I only knew Rosa always let me taste the broth first and taught me to sense flavor with my tongue, not with a recipe. By 16, I was crafting menus and hosting secret dinners for friends in the basement when my parents were away. We'd eat truffle mushroom chicken, sip fresh lime and mint juice, dim the lights, and light candles. One friend once whispered, "If you opened a restaurant, I'd wash dishes just to eat there every day." I laughed. But deep down, for the first time, I believed a different life might exist. A life where passion wasn't treated as shameful. My mother didn't agree. When she found out, she grabbed my wrist tight, eyes blazing, and said, "If you keep this foolish little chef act going, don't blame me when no one acknowledges you at your coming-of-age gala." It was a party she had planned for 2 years, with nearly 100 guests, including at least 3 congressmen and a Fortune 500 CEO. I understood her message loud and clear. In her eyes, a girl who cooked didn't belong at the same table as someone in a tuxedo. I didn't argue anymore. But from that day forward, I started saving my scholarship money, enrolling in online culinary classes, and writing menus in my journal. I didn't know where I was going or how I'd get out of that world, but I knew one thing. I wasn't born to sit quietly, eating cold soup at a table where my heart had no seat. I was accepted into the business administration program at the University of Michigan when I was 18, exactly what my family expected. It was a prestigious school, the kind you could brag about at cocktail parties, as my mother once put it. When they dropped me off at the dorms, my father shook hands with the dean, smiling like he was closing a deal. My mother was too busy adjusting her Hermes scarf, but still managed to remind me, "Don't disappoint us, Ariana. No one wants to invest in a half-baked degree." I nodded. On the surface, I was the perfect Miller daughter, neat, top GPA, punctual, but beneath that, I was living a second life. The dorm basement had a small, mostly abandoned kitchen because students preferred takeout over cooking. I made it my secret kitchen. After classes in finance and supply chain management, I'd tie on my apron, play soft jazz, and cook white wine mushroom sauce for my 3 roommates. At first, it was just small weekend dinners, but then rumors spread. A quiet brunette girl who made lasagna better than any Italian place in town. A freshman who could recreate orange glazed shrimp like it came straight from a New Orleans bistro, down to the fry temperature and the perfectly shaved citrus peel. I didn't advertise, I didn't post a menu, but students began slipping envelopes under my door, some with $10 bills, others with a cheap bottle of wine, in exchange for a seat at the Saturday underground supper. I called the group the Fork Society. 8 guests max, 3 mains, 1 dessert. No phones, no photos, and absolutely no mention of my identity. They thought I was just some quirky senior art student, not the daughter of Thomas Miller. Meanwhile, I remained top of my class in market analysis and investment strategy. I wasn't allowed to fail in the world my family built. By day, I sat in the front row of corporate finance lectures. By night, I chopped onions until my eyes burned, too scared to turn on the kitchen fan in case the dorm guards heard. I lived this way for almost 2 years, a double life. On one side, Ariana Miller, honors student and heir to Miller Properties. On the other, a beanie-wearing girl sneaking out to the grocery store at 11 p.m. to buy organic shallots and preservative-free pie crust. Then, everything unraveled in the winter of my sophomore year. One night, as I was prepping clove-braised lamb, someone knocked on my door, hard and fast. I opened it to see Olivia, my classmate from marketing, pale and panicked. Ariana, you're on BuzzFeed. I froze. She held out her phone. The headline read, "The Hidden Star of the Fork Society, Underground Chef Taking East Campus by Storm." The photos weren't clear, but the corner of the room, my copper pot, the striped scarf I always tied in my hair, it was all unmistakable. I knew who took them, a communications student who had once attended dinner and quietly filmed. I had suspected something from his expressions, but not enough to act. The article went viral within hours. Someone sent the link to my mother. 3 days later, I got a video call. She didn't say hello. Her voice was sharp, cold. How embarrassing. A Miller cooking in a basement like some vagrant. Do you think people admire that? I bit my tongue. We're going to handle this. You'll apologize publicly, shut down this nonsense, and return to the proper path. Understood? I answered calmly. No. She stared at me like I just spat on the family name. Then don't expect another cent from this family. I ended the call. Behind me, the pot was still bubbling. The smell of herbs and meat filled the cold January air. Some people lose everything when their secrets are exposed. But me? For the first time, I felt free. I dropped applied finance the following week. No one warned me that living as your truest self means watching old doors slam shut, while new ones, bigger and scarier, creak open. About 2 months after my exposure with the Fork Society, I received an email from a strange address. Subject, evaluation from Chef Donovan, Detroit Gourmet Showcase. I could barely breathe. It was the premier culinary event in the Midwest, reserved for chefs from major restaurants only. I hadn't applied. Turned out, one of my secret supper guests was the son of one of the judges. He'd sent a box of my homemade olive bread to him, with a note. Donovan Miller, a name that made chefs sweat. 2 Michelin stars for Harbor and Hearth in Boston. They called him the Iron General of the modern kitchen. I reread the final line of his email. I have an apprentice slot at the Slate. It's for someone with the guts to go all in. You have 3 days to reply. Then I move on. I sat still for 15 minutes, staring at my hands. The faint scar on my thumb still lingered, a reminder of slicing onions 3 ways in a freezing dorm basement. I touched it like a secret signal. This is it. The next day, I emptied my bank account. $1,920. Enough for a train ticket to Detroit and a temporary Airbnb in Midtown. I packed one suitcase, my personal knives, and a brown ink recipe notebook I'd kept hidden since high school. The slate was tucked inside a repurposed brick building. Black glass windows, no sign outside. Inside was a world without illusions, stainless steel, ovens imported from Spain, a timer clock over every station. I was assigned to the starter prep team, the lowest tier in Donovan's kitchen hierarchy. My supervisor, Mireille, a Haitian woman with mountain rock composure and scale-perfect precision, showed no mercy. First night, I got yelled at for slicing cucumbers the wrong thickness. "This isn't a dorm salad bar," she barked. "Each slice must be exactly 1/4 inch, not more, not less." I bowed my head, didn't argue. Redid the whole batch. 3 weeks in, I hadn't touched a single premium ingredient, just chopped, rinsed, arranged. If lucky, I got to taste broth with the back of a spoon. Then one night, after close, Donovan called me into his office. He didn't waste time. "I saw your radish cut 18 seconds flat, and that ginger tart from last Saturday." I swallowed. "1, your skills beat most culinary school grads. 2, your palate's nearly precise, but—" He squinted. "Can you handle real heat?" I looked him in the eye. I didn't leave my family, live off instant noodles, and sleep on a couch to plate salads. He let out a soft chuckle. "The first, then be on main station tomorrow." I walked home near 2 a.m., legs aching but heart pounding. I flipped on the lamp and opened my notebook, each page glowing like a spellbook. I served as junior sous chef at the Slate for 7 months. Donovan trained me personally. Every service was a masterclass in instincts no textbook could teach. Feeling heat by smell. Reading stress from the rhythm of knives on wood. It was there I met Jonah, a food photographer filming a PBS documentary. He'd come to shoot behind-the-scenes footage and later invited me to co-host a small charity dinner at the Detroit Art Museum. We curated a 6-course menu themed cuisine without credentials, recipes by young chefs once dismissed or overlooked. That night, one of the guests was Marcus Hall, founder of Cordon Square Ventures, a firm that funds independent chefs to launch their own restaurants. After dessert, a chilled lemon butter tart with poppy seed sauce, he walked up to me, eyes lit like he'd just struck gold. "Ms. Ariana, we need to talk. Ever thought about owning your own restaurant?" I clutched my water glass to steady my hand, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I knew it too well. I turned 23 in a third-floor apartment on Detroit's east side where the hot water came and went and the rats were as bold as special ops. It had 2 bedrooms but was divided into 3 living spaces using folding partitions. I slept on an old mattress by the window, next to a broken heater and a few potted plants I kept to mask the musty scent of peeling walls. My housemates included Clara, a nocturnal interior design student who lived like a vampire, Deshawn, a delivery driver and aspiring rapper, and Cam, a stage tech who tested lighting rigs right in our kitchen. We weren't family, but we were a bunch of quiet strugglers trying to survive. By day, I worked as a line cook at a newly opened restaurant in Midtown, handling nearly all the hot dishes on the middle station. Mornings started at 6 a.m. with deliveries, sorting, and prep, and ended after midnight when I was the last one scrubbing the kitchen. I didn't own a car. In winter, I wore a knit hat, wrapped my scarf twice, and walked over a mile through ankle-deep snow to make my morning shift. Some days the cold was so biting, my knife would slide off frozen meat instead of slicing through. At night, I didn't stop. I studied French culinary textbooks, learning how to break down collagen with low heat and long cook times. I watched Japanese chefs on YouTube, recording every knife movement. I knew if I only cooked well, I'd forever be working for someone else. In early March, I borrowed $15,000 from a microloan program for young female entrepreneurs. The terms were strict and the interest was steep. But I signed without blinking. I used it to enroll in a restaurant operations course at a local training center, taught by former executives from a well-known fine dining chain. Nights at school, days in the kitchen, and sourdough test bakes past midnight. That was my rhythm for 8 straight months. Some nights I'd fall asleep on the study desk, still holding a wooden spoon. No one knew I was the daughter of Thomas Miller, a real estate mogul in Georgia. No one needed to. I began building my restaurant dream piece by piece, an open kitchen concept where diners could watch every step, a seasonal menu using local ingredients, and a Scandinavian-inspired minimalist aesthetic. I named it Cedar Table because when I was a kid and said I loved cooking, my father tapped the cedar dining table at home and said, "You can use this table for your econ homework, not to play chef with food." Now I'd turn that name into something I owned. Every weekend, I hosted an underground supper club in that third-floor apartment. Guests sat on folding chairs around a makeshift table, built with salvaged stage wood. The three-course menu changed weekly, with suggested prices between $25 and $40, paid through Venmo. Even though I only served 6 people per session, word started getting around. A local food blogger, Vanessa Tran, wrote a heartfelt review of her Cedar Table pop-up edition meal. It went viral in Detroit's foodie circles. One night, as I finished the last of the dishes, Clara burst into the kitchen, eyes lit up. "You're in Detroit Weekly's Future Tastemakers column. They're calling you the secret chef with a palate bigger than this city." I smiled, a rare one, not out of pride, but because I knew the rule: dishes come first, then dreams. I still owed $9,300. I didn't have a business license, no storefront, no investors, but I had something many ahead of me no longer did: a steel belief that I was on the right path, even if it was all sharp rocks and cold snow. Because opportunity never knocks. It waits for you to stay up late, dry a plate with a clean towel, and ask yourself, what dish will I cook tomorrow to step closer to the dream? That evening, after the supper club wrapped up, I was wiping down the old folding table when a man in a trench coat walked into the apartment without knocking. Cam followed behind him, looking a little pale. "Amiana, he said you invited him." I looked up and froze. The man standing in front of me was none other than Marcus Hall, the investor who once offered to back me when I was still at the Slate. "I've been trying to get a seat at your supper club for 3 weeks, he said, voice calm and steady. "I finally called Jonah to get your address." I was confused. He wasn't on tonight's guest list, but I knew one thing. When someone like Marcus Hall comes to you, you don't send them out of the kitchen. I offered him a seat, poured the last glass of wine, and quietly remade my signature pumpkin gnocchi. Pillowy, soft, glazed in brown butter and fresh sage. He ate in silence. No phone, no small talk between bites. That was a good sign. When he put his fork down, he asked only one question. "How much risk are you willing to take for your dream?" I answered without hesitation. "I've already risked 100%. Now I just need someone to believe in it with me." 4 weeks later, we signed the official partnership. Marcus agreed to invest $1.2 million on the condition that I remain executive chef and co-own 40% of the startup restaurant. He had the connections to secure a prime space, a former bank on Randolph Street, right in the heart of downtown Detroit. I named the restaurant Rowan, a tree symbolizing protection and renewal, a reminder that no matter how much the past tried to bury me, I stood back up. The design was led by Clara herself. Cool ash tones, reclaimed wood, frosted glass. Every table was positioned so diners could see into the kitchen, not to show off, but to remind them that food comes from sweat and patience. I rehired the same people who stood with me at the supper club. Kim took over operations, Deshawn handled logistics. Mireille, the same woman who once yelled at me for slicing cucumbers wrong, left the Slate to become my sous chef. We opened after 8 months of construction and preparation. On opening night, I could barely breathe, but when the first guests walked in, a tall, elderly woman with her daughter, I heard them whisper, "I didn't think Detroit had a place this elegant without being over the top." I knew I was on the right track. For the first 90 days, Rowan was booked almost every night. Articles were written, food critics stopped by and left 4.5-star reviews. A local TV feature called us a fresh breath of Midwestern cuisine. But success didn't mean peace. 4 months after opening, I found out Marcus was planning to open a second Rowan in Chicago, without discussing it with me. I wasn't against expansion, but Rowan couldn't be a soulless brand. I invited Marcus to dinner. On the table was smoked salmon with pickled star anise radish, the first dish I ever created back in my dorm room. I said plainly, Rowan can be a dream with a soul, or it can be an investment project, but it can't be both. Marcus stayed quiet for a moment, then set down his napkin. Then buy me out. I hadn't expected him to say that, and I definitely hadn't expected him to mean it. 3 weeks later, I held the signed transfer papers. With support from a local women's investment fund, I officially became the sole owner of Rowan just 6 months after its birth. I stood beneath the sign etched into the front window. Rowan, engraved, reflecting the glow of the city at night. I didn't cry. I didn't post a made it photo online. I just stood there. Left hand holding the keys, right hand touching my neck, where I still wore the necklace Grandma Rosa gave me when I was 13, with a silver spoon pendant. And in that moment, I knew. I no longer needed to knock on anyone's door to be let into their world. I had built a door of my own. Thursday afternoon, I was reviewing next week's reservation list when Marla, the front of house manager, handed me a firm, ivory envelope with gold embossed lettering. The Miller family cordially invites you to the engagement celebration of Madison Miller and Alexander Bryant at Rowan Restaurant, May 18th, 7 p.m. I froze. Madison, my youngest sister. The same girl our mother used to parade around charity events, calling her the brightest hope of the Miller family. The same person who hadn't asked how I was doing for the past 5 years. I opened the reservation list for that day. Private party, 12 guests, booked by Evelyn Miller. No mention of any relation to the restaurant owner. They didn't know. They had booked the engagement dinner for their golden daughter right at the restaurant they once declared I would never be good enough to open. I spent the evening thinking. I could cancel. I could ask someone else to host and vanish into the background, but I didn't. I would be there, not for revenge, but to witness how they'd treat me now, thinking I was still just a girl who cooks. On the evening of May 18th, I wore a simple black dress and old low heels. No jewelry, no heavy makeup. My hair neatly pinned. I walked in through the front entrance, not the kitchen like I usually did. Marla looked at me like she'd seen a ghost. "Are you sure?" she whispered as I passed. I nodded. "I'm just a regular guest tonight." My family had arrived early. They occupied the long table at the center of the room, the most prominent spot. My mother wore a cream Chanel suit, holding a glass of red wine like a performer mid-act. Madison, the bride-to-be, beamed next to her fiancé Alexander, who looked exactly like his LinkedIn profile picture. Brandon, my eldest brother, still had the air of a political advisor, gray tie, analytical gaze. My father was critiquing the wine temperature with the confidence of someone who'd never washed a glass in his life. I approached. My mother turned, her eyes instantly scanning me with reflexive judgment. "Oh, Ariana." A pause just long enough to imply, "We didn't expect you to show. We didn't receive your RSV." I didn't think it needed to be formal, I smiled. I just came to congratulate Madison. Madison leaned in to kiss my cheek, a breeze passing through. "That's great, I thought you'd be busy with the kitchen." Alexander shook my hand. "Pleasure to meet you." His voice had the crisp pronunciation of a law school grad, the exact son-in-law profile my mother always dreamed of. I sat at the open seat at the end of the table, received a glass of water from the server. It was Marcus, a seasoned staff member I had trained for 3 months. He glanced at me, curiosity flashing in his eyes, but I gave a subtle shake of my head. Dinner began. The first course was roasted beet soup with basil oil and coconut cream, a dish I created during Rowan's first winter. "Looks interesting," my mother commented, trying a spoonful. "At least it's not too rich." Brandon frowned. "Is this vegan?" "Times change, brother," I murmured. "So where are you working these days?" Brandon pressed. "In a few places." Like a casual restaurant? Or are you selling food online? Alexander chimed in. Detroit has some cool community kitchens. Have you ever worked in one of those? I swallowed a bite of bread. I have, in the past. Madison set her glass down. Are you living alone now? I heard you moved. Yes, I heard that too, I smiled. The investment world is full of rumors. My mother glanced at the menu. Buck with cherry glaze sounds like something a junior chef would try. A bit ambitious, my father nodded. And not cheap, Brandon raised an eyebrow. Who owns this place anyway? I took a sip of water, tasting the faint mint, a detail I had requested from the very first week we opened. Someone who loves food, I said softly, not someone who cares about LinkedIn profiles. Marcus brought out the wine, my mother asked. Haha, that waitress looks familiar. He's the manager, I corrected. Alexander flipped the menu. Oh, Wagyu beef with black truffle sauce. Who came up with that? A woman, I said without blinking. Didn't attend culinary school, no MBA, but has an excellent palate. The table paused. Madison put her knife down. Are you implying something? I smiled, turning to Marcus. Would you mind bringing me the check before dessert? Dinner reached dessert. A chilled lemon tart with torched meringue at the table. Madison frowned as Marcus brought it out, tilting her head like she was trying to judge whether this playful dish lived up to the Miller family's standards. Too light, my mother commented, not having tasted it yet. Certainly not a classic French flavor, my father added. Do you think this kind of dish works for a wedding? Madison spun her plate, not taking a single bite. I didn't get a chance to respond before Marcus returned, holding a black leather folder with the bill. He placed it in the center of the table like a conductor closing the final note of a symphony. Brandon reached for it first, but Alexander beat him to it. He opened the folder, skimmed it quickly, then looked up abruptly. Wait, just drinks? No food charges? My father leaned in, frowning. Is this a mistake? The full bill should be included. Marcus remained calm. No mistake, Mr. Bryant. The meal was paid in advance by the restaurant owner. All eyes turned to me. I stayed seated, hand resting lightly on my water glass. My mother blinked. The owner is your friend. Marcus stepped forward with a smile. Allow me to officially introduce, this is Chef Ariana Miller, executive chef and sole owner of Rowan. A silence dropped over the table like someone had cut the power. Madison stared at me, mouth slightly open, as if trying to process whether she'd heard correctly. You own this place? I stood, slowly adjusting the strap of my watch. Yes, this is my restaurant. I built it with the first investment from a diner who tasted my pumpkin gnocchi in a third-floor apartment last year. Brandon leaned forward, looking at me with eyes not used to being outmaneuvered. Hold on, you're the owner? This whole brand? The property, the team, from the menu to the shape of the water glasses. My mother shifted her chair slightly, as if to dodge the ceiling light now shining directly on her. But you never said you were running anything. I smiled softly. Because when I was just the girl who cooked, no one asked what I was building. Only when I'd give it up. Alexander swallowed hard. But didn't you also write a book? Is the hidden fork in food and wine yours? Yes, publishing next month. A portion of the profits will fund my mentorship foundation for young chefs from overlooked neighborhoods. The entire table went still. I reached into my bag, pulled out a printed mock-up of the book cover, and placed it in front of my mother. She looked at the fine print below my name. Chef, founder, educator. Madison let out a dry, brittle laugh. So, while I thought you were living off frozen meals and coupon clippings, you've been building an entire culinary empire? I said nothing, just nodded. Brandon leaned back in his chair, exhaling. I used to think you threw everything away out of stubbornness. You weren't wrong, I said. I threw away the family's expectations. But I kept myself. My mother clutched her purse strap, lips pressed tight. Ariana, I I honestly had no idea you'd come this far. I looked her in the eye. Didn't know or didn't want to know. She looked down, said nothing. Marcus returned with a tablet. Ms. Ariana, conference room 2 is ready. The Manhattan investor group is waiting. I nodded. I'll be right there. As I turned away, my father spoke for the first time all night. You've done something no one in this family imagined, with your own hands. He paused. We owe you an apology. I didn't turn back. But I heard it. As the main doors closed behind me, I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt at peace. 3 days after that fateful evening, I received a message from Madison. Can we meet for coffee? Not to explain. I just want to say this without a dinner table in between. I agreed. We picked a small cafe in Corktown, the kind that serves cappuccinos with slightly clumsy heart-shaped foam but real warmth. Madison arrived on time, wearing minimal makeup and for the first time a hoodie without accessories. I used to think I knew everything, she began. And now? I asked, taking a sip of espresso. Now I know. Understanding doesn't beat the courage to reevaluate. I said nothing. In her eyes, there was a kind of defenseless unease, rare for someone raised to believe failure was unacceptable. I'm sorry for thinking you gave up. You just refused to run someone else's race. You don't have to apologize, I replied gently, but thank you for saying it. A moment of silence passed. Will you come to the wedding? I nodded. Not as the odd one out or the embarrassment, just as the older sister. No strings attached. Madison looked at me as if searching for something behind those words. I do have a request, if that's okay. Go ahead. I want the rehearsal dinner, the intimate one, held at Rowan, not because it's fancy, but because I want the people who matter most to taste your food and understand your story through flavor, not secondhand tales. I didn't respond right away, but when I smiled and gently touched her coffee cup, she knew it was a yes. That evening, the official engagement dinner, not a performance, but something truly personal, I stood in my familiar kitchen wearing my chef's coat with AM embroidered over the heart. The menu I prepared wasn't for show. I chose what felt close. Multigrain bread toasted in brown butter with sea salt, wild mushroom soup simmered in a 16-hour bone broth, seared duck in orange reduction, just like Rosé used to make for me. Each dish carried a piece of my life. No lengthy explanations needed. They just had to eat and feel. My mother was the first to walk into the kitchen after the meal. Not to compliment me, that would have been too out of character, but simply to stand there. I never realized a kitchen could be this quiet, she said, glancing around. That's how I run it. No shouting, no banging knives, just focus. She nodded, her hand brushing the cold, stainless steel counter. When you were little, I used to think passion was a luxury. Now I see, it's the backbone. I didn't reply right away. That kind of admission from her was a form of courage I never expected. I may not understand all of you, she continued, but I know. If there's anyone in this family to be proud of today, it's you. For the first time in years, I saw her eyes without judgment or calculation, just the look of a real mother. Late, but genuine. 2 weeks later, the wedding took place in a small garden behind the Detroit Art Museum. I wasn't in the front row. I didn't wear anything flashy. But when Madison introduced me to the guests, this is my sister, the strongest woman I know, and also the reason tonight's appetizer surprised everyone so much. I saw something I once thought impossible in my mother's smile, my father's nod, in the silent squeeze of Brandon's hand. Recognition. Without conditions. I didn't need them to understand everything I had been through. I only needed them to know. I didn't fail because I chose a different path. I succeeded because I dared to walk it alone. And now, I'm no longer trying to be someone they can be proud of. I've become someone I am proud of. No permission, no proof, just living, with all the strength and grace that kitchen taught me. Ariana's story is proof that success doesn't need a stamp of approval from family or society. It comes from unwavering passion and the courage to walk your own path. In real life, many people, like Ariana, have been dismissed for choosing differently, but it's their perseverance and belief in their own worth that leads to true achievement. The most powerful recognition doesn't come from the outside, it comes from that moment you lift your head high and know, I wrote my own story. What do you think about Ariana's choices and journey? Would you dare to walk alone like she did? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about life and family.